Welcome back, everyone, to the Property Journey podcast. It has been a few weeks, Roy.
It definitely has been.
We have been busy, we have been doing other bits and pieces, and we have not found the time to sit down and record.
And we're now getting it done today.
So we are back with episode 41. So I wanted to discuss emotional buying decisions. I just stated that very clearly because Roy thought I said something else earlier, and I just wanted to make sure everyone
was wrong.
Completely wrong. I was worried we might have get cancelled there. Emotional buying decisions. So the reason why I want to talk about this, Roy, is obviously when it comes to buying a property, you've got the sort of emotional side of the decision. Then there's also the rational, side of the decision. With the way that the current market is, and I'm talking as much as first-time buyers, I'm talking about home movers, I'm talking even as far as investors as well. With the way that the property market is, how busy it is, how much property is in demand, the way the prices are going, the emotional aspect can, let's say, maybe take over rather than the rational.
Absolutely.
So kind of setting the scene, how much of a property decision is emotional and kind of how much of it is rational at the same time?
Well, from an investor point of view, it's probably least emotional, because if you're a true investor, you're simply looking at a property, you've done your figures on it, and if it doesn't stack up or it's being bid over, then you walk away. Now, occasionally, maybe at the minute, we're seeing a few people getting carried away, not from an emotional point of view, it's because there's a shortage. So then if there is something there, then they're maybe hanging on that wee bit longer. But particularly for first-time buyers and home movers, a vast majority of the decision is made on the emotional side of things. It's very easy to get caught up. You fall in love with a house. I ask a lot of the buyers, and they've maybe only looked at 3 or 4 houses, and then they immediately find the one that they feel is the one, and it's just they get carried away.
Yeah, and that's because sort of why I wanted to discuss this today, because sometimes you believe that you're being logical about the decision, and actually you're not.
No,
it very much is being driven by emotion.
I'll give you an example. Come across a scenario where a first-time buyer was looking at a range of properties, normally a type of property that I would call for the investor market. The reason for that was because there's very little property out there for the first-time buyer. And this particular property went on the market at £90,000. It got bid up, got carried away, went up to nearly £120,000. And got agreed to them. And then it was after that, after a few weeks after they got, that excitement of the bidding and what have you, then they took maybe a second look at it and got somebody to take a look at it. Then they started to realise, you know what, I think we've got carried away here. And they pulled out of the transaction. And unfortunately for the seller, then it went from a house that they thought were going to get nearly £120,000 right back down to the asking price of £90,000. And in that scenario, it's quite unfortunate then for a seller, because it's risky. If you go back to an underbidder might think to themselves, well, if somebody else doesn't want the house, then they're not going to want the house. Whereas when it's the other way around, if somebody wants that house, I want that house.
Yeah.
So it can very quickly then be the underbidder's not interested, and then it comes plummeting right back down to the starting price.
And I suppose there, even for the seller as well, they're maybe even thinking to themselves, I've got this house up at, say, the bid's currently at 114 or whatever, and they then start looking at properties that might have been slightly outside of their price range, but they're thinking, well, I'm going to get more for this one, so therefore I can afford more.
Yeah.
So
it's a knock-on impact. Now, some agents we're seeing now are having that open conversation, whereby when it starts to bid, to then say, right, well, okay, you want to pay more, but whenever it comes to the mortgage company coming out and valuing it, the mortgage company might actually realise or say here, you know what, you're bidding too much for it. They downvalue it. How will you, the estate agent's asking, how will you play this out? Now, I know that frustrates a few people, but I suppose the positive of that, the estate agent is nipping it in the bud very quickly. If this gets carried away, are you gonna wreck the sale for us? That's basically what they're protecting.
And they're probably looking at that going, nearly from a logical perspective of, can you afford to, as you say, if the mortgage company's not going to cover the full amount of mortgage, the mortgage amount or the purchase amount, do you have the source of funds to be able to, back it up then? Is it possible then to remove the emotion entirely? Now, as you said, from the investor point of view, that's probably quite easier or a wee bit simpler for the simple fact that you're not really going to be attached to the property because you're not living in it. When you're a first-time buyer, it's your first home. When you're a home mover, you could be moving in to your first family home. There is going to be a lot of emotion attached to that.
I have to openly say I've been there. So yes, if it's an investment property, I'm able just to switch off from it. But I have been in a scenario where there's a house that I particularly wanted. I've been looking, bidding on a few, and I just knew, well, you know what, if I don't get it, I don't get it, and I was content. But then when the right one came up and I was ticking all the boxes and I knew nothing else was ever going to come anywhere near it, then yes, and got completely pulled into it and carried away. But I made the decision, I committed to it and didn't look back.
Yeah.
But it's if you're willing to make, I suppose, if you're willing to make that commitment, that no matter what, if you get it and that's what you want, and you're prepared that if the market maybe slips a wee bit and you've paid too much and still suits all your needs, all well and good. But otherwise, maybe just still have a bit of a cop on.
Yeah. Just be wary of the kind of what you're doing then. Yeah. And I suppose then that kind of plays into the next question of, are those emotional decisions always bad or can sometimes be quite positive? Because I suppose if you're attached to the house straight away and you're thinking to yourself, well, I'm not moving for 35, 40 years, 50 years, whatever it happens to be, once this is my house, if you're emotionally driven by that and that's the house that you want and that's the decision that you want to make, it's probably not a bad thing.
Absolutely. If you're emotional for all reasons, so for instance, sometimes we see people just get emotional because the house looks really pretty and really nice and it's ready to move into. That's only one part of it. But if you can, if it's a scenario where the location's right for you, maybe it's close to schools and you definitely want your kids to go to that particular school. Maybe you don't have kids and you're thinking about having kids and you're forward thinking, or you're thinking later on in life, family's close to you. So if it's ticking a lot of boxes, and I think the best way maybe to summarise it is, and not to be negative, but if the market did slow down or it dropped, and are you going to be happy to live there for 10, 15 years? And if you're saying completely yes, no matter what, I will not be moving from this house because of all these circumstances, well then it's good.
And I suppose there's an emotional drive behind that, but as you've listed out there, logically speaking, if it's ticking the boxes as well, then you're fitting the logical box, in terms of what the house needs is. My next question kind of maybe counters that a wee bit. The intense pressure that sometimes, as you say, once you get dragged into it, and first-time buyers might not have experienced this before, when they're kind of getting that pressure of, someone's coming in with a bid and you've only put the bid on 20 minutes ago. Yeah. That intensity, kind of the emotion might start to come out there then, where the logical subsides and the emotion comes out.
You have to also think about the affordability side of things, because on the one hand, yes, you can get carried away and you really want a house, but then it's going to cost you more, which means your monthly payment's going to be higher. Can you afford that? Yeah. Or is there somewhere else in your life that you're looking to make that sacrifice to cut back on something? And in reality, that's never always the way. So you have to be careful and maybe don't allow yourself to be carried away. So it can be very easy maybe for, you put your bid on and the estate agent comes back and says there's a higher bid. You can kind of step back from it and see how it plays out. Now, occasionally we hear stories where people maybe then miss out in a scenario. But if it was me, where you're wanting to play it cool, step back, but still don't rely on getting updated.
Yeah.
Because understandably, you're not in the game, you're not in the running, so why would you be kept up to date? Some would argue. But you keep in touch just to see what way is that going, what's the bid now? Because it might be the case where it's only that one more bid is where it's sitting at, or you go back a few days or a week or two later and the price is 10, 15 above. Well, then there you go. That's made your decision. You know it's above and beyond, so walk away.
Because that kind of comes back in, and I know there I have a few people at the moment that have been searching, recently sold their property and has now been looking for one and find it very difficult. Wasn't expecting the house to go as quickly as it did. Then it was kind of going, oh no, we need to look for a house. Thank God, luckily they've been able to get one. But that kind of pressure pot can also,
Absolutely.
you know, the emotions then beginning to come out because you realise that, oh no, I might have to be out of this house in 3-4 months. And then you realise there's not that many properties maybe on the market in terms of, or there is, but the demand for them is there. You know, rental properties, even demand for them is there.
Yeah.
You know, so it's not just as easy as going, oh, well, sure, we can rent for 12 months because there's just, you know, not as many rental properties out there as well. That sort of, is there any practical steps that you can kind of do sort of to maybe slow down the emotional decisions? Is it maybe if you're buying with a partner, for example, one has to kind of go, you know what, no, we're drawing the line here.
Simple advice, sounds simple, but a lot of people don't listen to it, is play it cool. As you say, a lot of people, and it's the way life is, it's very easy to get caught up in the hype of it all. So yes, moving house can be very tricky. You know, do you sell, you haven't found somewhere, do you move out and then find somewhere? If it was me, you simply put the house in the market and you make it known to any bidders, listen, you're putting the house in the market, you haven't found somewhere yet, and you're going down that route. So that means if an interested party bids on it and you've accepted it, well, that's it. That's accepted on the basis that you're going to find somewhere.
Yeah.
If you don't find anywhere, well then let that go. It's not ideal, but at least you need to find somewhere that you're not pressurised into. And this is where the problem comes to, because they've agreed to sell their house. They're then looking somewhere. There's maybe only 2 or 3 houses on the market, and then they're maybe picking a house that really they wouldn't have bought in the first place.
Yeah.
And then this is where the pressure comes in, and trying to control completion dates and what have you. You simply have to play it cool, write it out. Sometimes it'll take a lot longer than maybe what you think, but at least you know the right steps, and it's going to be right then.
Yeah, yeah. Have you kind of then seen that, you know, in terms of the overpaying side of things, you know, is it becoming more common? And possibly by that what I mean is a lot of houses that you see now is going on for a certain price. Call it 120 grand, 130 grand, whatever it happens to be. You're looking at most properties going for maybe 10, 15% more than what the asking price is. Is that also then playing in sort of in the emotional side of things where people are getting caught up in the hype, and before you know it, the house was 120, it's now 132?
In a way, yes, it would be. It comes back to supply and demand. You know, there's just not enough properties on the market, so anybody that's out there, then yes, that's pushing it up. The good thing is this is where the bank comes in, and we do see it every now and then. You can see particular areas where prices maybe rally very, very quickly. So whenever you agree to buy a house and you go to get a mortgage, they send out a valuer to check, is the house worth what you've bid on it? And there's times where the valuer will come back and say, no, it's not. Now, they might come back and say it's only a couple of grand below, or it's 5 grand or what have you. But at least that's in a way cooling, or not, I wouldn't say cooling, but more like controlling the market to allow things from being carried away. So that in itself can help too.
Because I suppose by that, it's a case of, you know, no, it's not worth it here. Are you willing to pay the 15 grand or 20 grand or whatever that you've decided to bid over the price of, you know, what the asking price was or what the house is worth? If you're doing that, a lot of people will not be willing to shell that out.
There's a couple of schools of thought. Some people will say, right, well, sure, if it's bid on and then the bank undervalues it, well, let's go to the seller and renegotiate. Now, that's dangerous, because the seller might say, no, that's what you've agreed, so you take it or leave it.
Yeah.
Or sometimes the seller might think to themselves, right, well, fair enough, things did get carried away. I'm not impacted on my onward purchase, so rather than having to put back to the market or losing it, they'll accept it. So it's a dangerous one to play. So that's why if you're cautious and you don't get carried away, well.
And also it's probably maybe even thrown into the argument of if it has went too far, but you've got the money or the funds to be able to continue, and you're happy enough, again, the emotional side of thing comes through where you're intending to spend 20, 30 years in the house, well,
so be it, yeah.
So be it. The other aspect then is kind of like, you know, and I suppose when we talk about emotion, you know, there's a range of it. There's, you know, happy, sad, whatever it happens to be, but there's fear. What's more kind of common? The fear of losing the property, or the fear of you maybe making a mistake?
That's a good question. Good question. I would say probably more so the fear of missing out. It's the fear of missing out, because there's that fear of, we do hear it every now and then. People would say, you know, there's nothing else in the market. I'm being outbid. I better get this house bought quickly before prices go mad, or before, you know, there's nothing else in the area. So there's probably fear of missing out.
And I suppose then, because the market is so fast moving, that would nearly amplify that fear of losing out, you know, because as you said, if the houses are disappearing off the market as quickly as they're coming on, and you are desperate to buy a house in a, say, a certain area or whatever, that fear begins to build up that you may never get a house in the area.
Yeah.
Is there any way that you would say then to kind of combat that of staying calm? Is it just you have to write it out? You kind of have to wait until the right thing comes up and probably sort of pull the pin or pull the trigger whenever it's the right time to do it?
Probably be prepared that when you go looking and you find a house, it just may not be the right one.
Yeah.
Because it's no different to looking at a house. You might think this is the one, and then you get the survey done, and the survey flags up a whole lot of issues, and therefore you're not going to buy it. So maybe keep an open mind and be prepared that it is going to take time. This is probably another reason too. You know, we're so well used to going online, ordering something, and if it's not delivered within 2 days, you're hopping mad. And people bring that mindset to buying a house. It's not a couple of days.
No.
You know, particularly if you're moving house, you'll easily lose 6, 7, 8 months.
Yeah. And it's not even that. It's the longevity of the fact that you're not just buying this house for, you know, we've discussed it about the mortgage. You know, it's not like you're taking Klarna on a 3 monthly payments. Like, you know, this is a 30-year term, mortgage term, or of 35 years or whatever it happens to be. It's essentially half your life, you know, that you're going to be basing this decision on. So if you're bidding on a property and you're intending and tying yourself down, you shouldn't be getting caught up probably in the emotion of it and getting dragged in and worrying and letting the fear kind of manipulate your decisions. The
easiest option would be, if anybody's out there and they're looking at houses and they're getting let down and what have you, buy a brand new house. Because all those fears are removed, because it's launched at a price. That's it. So there's no bidding. The date is technically controlled by, fair enough, within reason. The house is built, and nowadays builders don't hang around. You know, the house will be built, and you're given a target date, and 9 times out of 10 it hits it.
Yeah.
And then you can move in whenever you want. So if you're a first time buyer, go for it. If you're a home mover, we see people as well buying a brand new house, because at least then you're only controlling the sale, because your purchase is technically controlled by when the new house is ready.
Yeah.
So we've seen people who their first house is a brand new house.
Yeah.
And then they upgrade so many years later, maybe to a bigger house because they've got a family, so they sell it and buy a brand new one, maybe in the same development. So again, they're well aware of the area, well aware of everything, and they're just simply moving to a bigger house.
Yeah. I kind of then want to touch then on the property investor side then, because I know a lot of this would be mainly geared towards first-time buyers, home movers. But in terms of investors, you touched there that there's a slight amount of emotion starting to creep into some of the decisions. Is that based on demand and, again, the fear of missing out?
Probably the fear of missing out, and if somebody maybe has the money there and they want to buy it, they want to get an investment, and they know or they're aware that the market is rising, they will push on. Because, and I've seen it in the past too, because you just want to get a house bought because you can see demand in a particular area and things are going mad, so you're jumping in there before somebody else does.
Yeah.
But the vast majority of times, most investors will pick a limit and they'll either pull the pin at that, or they might have like a bit of a play, go a wee bit higher, and at least then, like, my view is always you have a line and you have another 2,000 or 3,000 on it, because you're going to kick yourself if you've walked away for the sake of £1,000 maybe, or £2,000. So you stick it on, but then after that, that's it.
Yeah. And it's probably then, some of the things that I've got down here, is there elements of ego, for example, being, driving emotional decisions there as well when it comes to that side of things? Is there maybe past success, or kind of knowing the way that things have panned out previously, kind of give maybe a wee bit more of an overconfidence that, say, for example, as you discussed there, an extra 1,000 or 2,000 or 3,000 or whatever, and you kind of know because you've done that before. Can you get sort of roped into that sort of where, oh, well, sure, it'll only be a few thousand more or whatever, but that few thousand more creeps well past the line, as you said?
Generally, I would say no, but when you said the word ego there, I know of a few people where it doesn't often happen, where they maybe own 1 or 2 in a row already, and there's maybe only 4 in the row or 5 in the row.
Yeah. So
it becomes a point where they want to, I wouldn't say an ego, but maybe just an achievement. And part of me can say, well, you can understand for being able to drive down the street and say, here, that whole row's mine. Yeah. So possibly. And I've heard of different strategies in England where some people would purposely do that, where they want to buy as many in a street as possible. And possibly because of ego, but then it's also then because of, in a way, they can indirectly control the rent. Because if they can set the rent for that area or for that street, well then if they can push the rent up in that house and that rents, well then the next time they have a house up for rent in that street, well again, they're setting the rent.
I suppose management would be, a wee bit easier because you're kind of just walking down.
Well, yeah. The pros and cons, because the downside to it is if a particular area then takes a bit of a hit, well then your portfolio's wiped out. But from a convenience point of view, it could be very handy. You send one tradesperson in, say, right, go and clean all those gutters, go and cut all those hedges, go and go and paint them. So it could be a bit of convenience.
I do know of somewhere close to me where, as you described, only it was a town centre, and there was about 3 or 4 characters who numerous streets in the town was being bought up, and it became sort of nearly a challenge of there's one missing here, or there's 2 missing, or whatever it happens to be, and it was trying to basically finish the puzzle. Kind of then leading on to regret and maybe a bit of remorse. There's 2 sides to this. There's the remorse side of things of maybe not pushing ahead and pulling out. There's also the remorse or regret after completion because you maybe realise that you've made the wrong decision.
Yeah, I have to share that I have seen times. I can remember one particular person that once all was signed, he put his head down on the desk and said, I don't want this house. And I couldn't understand, well, why did you go through this whole process? You've never shared anything. You've never said anything to me. I also gave you an opportunity before you signed, explain the process. This is a last opportunity. Just saying it as a general, explaining the process. And his simple answer was, he was backed into a situation where he sold a house and then couldn't find somewhere else to go to, and he picked one, and literally the day that he bought it, he completely and utterly regretted it. And it definitely opened my eyes, but the story has a silver lining. He then did sell it 6 months later, and he made a few pound on it. Mm-hmm. So from a financial point of view, he came away okay, but he was still massively hit personally, because then he hadn't got the right home and he'd given up. I suppose, and he realised once he'd left his house that it actually was a good house. Yeah. But it's a very rare scenario, that.
Because then I suppose there's obviously the side of things as well, where the emotion comes in, where you've bought the property and you maybe get in and you realise this room doesn't work, or there was maybe issues that because you ploughed ahead and you maybe didn't get the likes of a survey done or something like that there, and you've just spent a load of money on a house which actually there was quite a few problems in. Have you seen a few of those kind of situations?
I've seen a few of those, or even more basic than that. You go and see a house for sale, looks lovely, it can be shown up like a show house, but at the end of the day, that person has made it the show house. So once they take all their furniture out, take all their pictures and photos down and what have you, it just doesn't look the same.
Yeah.
And you can kind of then see, initially you thought, oh, this house is ready to go, but once you take photos down, you can actually start to see marks on walls which you wouldn't have noticed before.
It's like the wardrobe. You always take away a standing wardrobe, and when you look at it, you just see the black outline on the wall.
Absolutely. And then you realise actually there is more work to be done here, and this house only looked well because the person previously. And a big one is, actually, I had a discussion with somebody last week, the outside of a house. Mm-hmm. We were chatting about, as a friend of mine, I said, you tell your dad to go back to that house that he sold, because it's not being well kept. Because beforehand, outside, the hedges were immaculate, the driveway was perfect. That's what made that house.
Yeah.
And then now, whenever you drive past it and you see the moss growing and the grass is 6 foot tall, and it just completely takes away from the look of the house, because people don't realise in that scenario how much time and effort is put into decorating, maintaining, keeping the inside of a house. And likewise outside. Yeah.
I think the big thing, as you always are, as you've said there, is you drive past a house and the grass hasn't been cut, and there's something about it that just doesn't. It looks run down. And maybe even the hedges haven't been trimmed, or, as you said, the driveway. There's so many different wee things. I find driveways, actually, when the tarmac started to break down, and it's stony. It's not a good look.
It hasn't been kept, and they've allowed moss to grow, and then the moss, then if you leave it too late and you try to scrape it off, then it's buried down in.
Yeah, and it's pulling.
It's loosening up the tar, and then once that starts, that's...
Yeah. And that's the thing, for some people that maybe doesn't bother them, and that's fine. But when you go to sell property, that can be the difference between maybe, an extra £1,000 or £4,000 or £5,000,
Easily.
Just from someone driving past and thinking, nope, that looks really good. That's the one that I want.
Absolutely.
Sort of the last couple then, Roy. Would you say there was an emotional decision that you made that kind of taught you maybe the biggest lesson, where you thought to yourself, I'm never doing that again?
Not emotionally, because the one property I was talking about, definitely no regrets in that. I certainly have made a few bad decisions over the years in properties. Probably, yeah. When I think about it, there's one where I probably knew I shouldn't have. Mm-hmm. And when I got into it, then realised one, I was banning blind, because I thought, well, area's good, I've had knowledge of that area, I'll take a punt on it. And it just hasn't stacked up, and it's cost me a few quid. So, I think everybody's learned.
And I suppose then, if listeners, and I'm going to possibly say this or break this question down, if they were to take one thing from this episode, what would it be? So, the first point of that would be probably geared towards your first-time buyers and home movers. What should they take away? And secondly, then, investors.
First-time buyers, the best advice would be, if you're getting frustrated, just buy brand new. Because yes, it might be a wee bit more expensive, but you know exactly what you're getting. Brand new house, good to go, fixed date, generally, cost, everything's plain as day. For home movers, best advice would be play it cool. Because don't get carried away, don't be forced into anything, and just slow the whole thing down. I think, is it the American Seals or something like that? Slow is smooth, smooth is fast. So slow it all down. And then for investors, is just, again, maybe as you say, don't get carried away with ego and just do your numbers. Maybe stick a wee bit extra on to it for, as I say in the country, a bit of good luck. Mm-hmm. And then after that, walk away. Just be prepared. Because there's always, from an investment point of view, there's always going to be another property.
Yeah.
Always going to be another property.
Yeah. That's it then, Roy. That's episode 41. Thank you very much for answering all those questions. Folks, that's the sort of emotional decisions behind buying a property. Hopefully you've enjoyed that. It's a wee bit of a different episode, Roy. Mm-hmm. It's kind of more psychological rather than the bread and butter that we normally talk about. So fingers crossed we'll be back shortly with another episode. Thank you all again for tuning in, and we'll see you in the next episode.
Thank you.